Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Seaman, LinkedIn Senior Managing Editor for Jobs and Career Development. Welcome to LinkedIn News Live. Today, we're celebrating Pride Month, which celebrates the contributions of LGBTQ people throughout history, honors the progress these communities have made over the years, and recognizes the challenges they still face. Today's show looks specifically at how members of the LGBTQ community can navigate workplace issues and have a better understanding of their rights at their job. Also, we'll talk about what coworkers should know about what LGBTQ people are facing in the world right now. Before we dive into that topic, though, I want to have a quick check-in about respect during this broadcast. I understand that people sometimes have very passionate feelings when it comes to this topic, especially on the internet, where we are right now. Regardless of your feelings, though, I expect you to treat each other with respect in the comments. I'm gay, and my guests will also be members of the LGBTQ communities. We believe that who a person is or love does not exempt them of their rights, and if you disagree with that perspective, I invite you to stick around and hear us out, but only if you could be respectful. Now that that's out of the way, let's get going. My first guest is our very own Jessi Hempel, who's editor-at-large here at LinkedIn News. She's also the author of her memoir, A Family Outing, a personal look at her family and their relationship with the concept of coming out. Welcome, Jessi.
Hey, Andrew. It's really great to be here. Happy Pride.
Yes, happy Pride to you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so happy that we get to talk about your book finally.
I know. It was such a wonderful thing that while I was working here at LinkedIn, could also get to pursue this incredible personal project.
Yes, and well, actually, can you tell us a little bit about the book? Because I want to talk to you a little bit about what you're doing now with it, but can you tell us sort of what you're doing with the book, or what the book was about?
Yeah, so the book starts, well, let me just take you back a second to the time when I was 19 years old and I came out to my parents. I did it in the back of a car, and I'm guessing if you are watching and you happen to be a member of the queer community, you may have done it in a car too. Turns out that's a place people love to come out. I told my parents and my mom started crying, and then she said the right thing. She said, "I love you so much." My dad said nothing, Andrew. Next day, my dad walks in the kitchen. He says, "I thought I was gay once too." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, I made choices in life and I married your mom." And he walked out of the kitchen. And that was the first time, Andrew, that I thought, gosh, maybe my dad's gay.
Mm-hmm.
But 3 years later, my dad comes out of the closet as gay. My sister comes out of the closet as bisexual. My brother comes out of the closet as transgender. And throughout this whole period, my mother comes to terms with some very significant things that happened to her in her childhood. Now, Andrew, this happened 20 years ago. And I never thought much about it beyond thinking, well, I've got a really great story at a cocktail party. Let me tell you about my whole family coming out. But I realized over the course of my life as an adult that we're very close. We get along so well. And I thought that a lot of it had to do with coming out. That it's my belief that when you can be your authentic self among the people that you love, you can know them better. And so I set out over the last year and a half to write a book about that. And if it's any good, it's also kind of a beach read, like a page turner. But that's really what the book is about.
Yeah, and it's also, it's really the perfect read, I think, for people who aren't sure sort of how LGBTQ topics relate to their families, because it really comes down to love and the community that you have as a family. And this is something that you shared over the years too, because there's probably a lot of people that still come up to you, talk about a piece you did in Time magazine a while ago, right?
Right, a piece about my brother. This was in 2016. My brother is transgender, and Andrew, he got pregnant and he had a baby. And I wrote a story about that for Time. And what I think was remarkable about that story is that I am a gay woman, and yet I didn't really understand why my brother was making the choice he did. And so I tried to really write about a thing that is, I believe, true for all people, which is that we don't always understand the people that we love the most, but we don't need to in order to love them.
Yeah.
Right. And that is at the heart of this book too. And I think, you can get very political very quickly when you're talking about these things. But when you dial it back to where you began, which is this idea of respect, I think that you find that a lot of people in our country right now and across the world who are just trying really hard to love the people they care the most about and to afford them respect, even when they don't understand something.
Definitely. And, before we get on to the next question, I just want to say hello to everyone who's joining this broadcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have Magali who's saying, let's support the community, spread the love, and also get educated on the subject. So I love that sentiment. We have Melissa from Washington, Courtney from New York, where we are, and Ajish from India. So welcome to all of you. And Jesse, can you tell us what you're doing now with your book? Because I know I sat next to you really when you said, we need to do something about all of this anti-LGBTQ legislation that's popping up around the country. And I know we have a graphic about all of the bills that have been proposed recently. I think it's more than double really what we've seen in the past years. So, can you tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on with your book?
Yep, this is what I like to call my little family pride action, Andrew. And it comes from exactly what you're talking about. In all of the time that I have been out as a queer person, Pride has never felt more significant as a month, because it is a moment right now in our history where it feels like the queer community broadly is under attack. And I'm seeing that very personally because I'm getting notes from readers in places who are saying, hey, my library wants to remove your book. Hey, I fought really hard to keep your book in my library. And I got one of these emails from a woman in Arkansas, and she sent me a picture of the book. And inside the book, there was a dedication page. And it was dedicated to a teenager who had died by suicide because they were trans. And I looked at this and I thought, the price of this moment is visibility. The price of this moment is that people who are living in their communities, perhaps safely, are going to feel less safe. And they're going to talk less about who they are. And they're going to share less about their stories. And young people coming up in these communities won't have the kind of access that I want for my children to people in the queer community. And so I thought, you know what? It's got to be simple. Like, why can't we just get these stories about people in the queer community out in every neighborhood? Why do we have to rely on politics? Why do we have to rely on traditional library system or traditional education systems? Yes, I would like to rely on all those things. But if we maybe don't have those things in the future, what can we do now? And I came up with the idea of the Gift It Forward campaign. And Andrew, this is how it works. It's 2 buttons. One button says sponsor a book. You press that button and you can essentially sponsor a book or 3 books or 10 books to go out into any community in the United States that is within a state where anti-trans legislation is on the ballot. And by the way, Andrew, that's almost every state, right? One button says receive a book. And if you're an educator or an ally or an activist or a librarian, and you'd simply like a copy of the book, we want to send you one. And our goal really this month is simply to spread this story far and wide. And it's not just about this story, the family outing, right? The family outing is just one story. It's to spread all of our queer stories far and wide. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And also, and I think, what's great is I think a lot of people, when they hear people talk from New York City like we are, they think, oh, you don't get other parts of the country. But you and your family, you are sort of by hemisphere. You not necessarily hemisphere, but you spend so much time in the South. You spend a lot of time in the North. So you really do get a sense of like what's happening across 2 very different areas of the country, right?
That's right. So my wife grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi. And we make our home between Brooklyn, New York, and Tupelo. We're raising 2 little kids. We go back and forth. Every year we spend a couple of months in Tupelo over the course of the year. And in fact, I can tell you just based on my experience that you will not find warmer and more inclusive people than our community in Tupelo, Mississippi, right? And that was a message that I wanted to spread too. I think we are too quick to jump to conclusions about what people who live in places that we don't think. My experience of Tupelo, Mississippi is one of love and neighborliness, a place where I trust my children with any of the adults we know there, and where I believe that people just want to figure out how to be supportive, right? And by the way, the family outing had its biggest turnout for a book event in Mississippi.
That's amazing. And also, I think when it comes down to it, for kids who are in these communities across the country, especially kids who are trans, non-binary, and they see the attacks that are happening across the country, they can go to their library, which for anyone could be an escape, and it's accessible. So that's one of the best things about books.
Yes.
How can people find those buttons that you want them to click?
So the easiest way is to go to my website at jessiejhempel.com or find me on LinkedIn at Jessie Hempel. And all of the information is right there. And really, Andrew, it is as simple as give a book, get a book.
That's amazing. Well, Jessie, we'll be right back. We're going to continue this conversation with another special guest. But in the meantime, we are going to take a look at some prominent out professionals have told us over the years about showing up as yourself at work and what that can mean for your career.
The reason I've been able to maintain a career for so long is that alongside my ambition, I was also peeling away at the layers of emotional baggage that holds most people down. So those people who are having to hide themselves at work, a lot of times all it takes is one person outside of work or at work who can just understand you and you can be yourself with.
A lot of people ask me, do you think it hurt your career when you came out? I always say, well, I went from selling about 1 million records to selling 7 million records. So I always say it fortified, it strengthened me. Every room I walked in, they knew I was gay. I had to feel 100% in that. So my career had a big boost from me being honest, from me being powerful, from me not being afraid of something and giving all my strength to that.
I was closeted for most of my adult life. I had real apprehensions about coming out. I thought I might have to give up my career. I had more opportunities. My career has broadened and strengthened and become much, much more honest and true and pleasurable. Be proud of who you are. You have unique contributions to make.
Let's talk about how the LGBTQ community can protect themselves at work against discrimination. Joining Jessie and myself is Sam Tom, Director of Operations at the National LGBTQ Task Force. Welcome, Sam.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about the National LGBTQ Task Force? Because it has such a huge history and the foundations of really the equal rights movement in the US.
The queer equal rights movement, sure. And we believe in intersectionality deeply. So, it's a rising tide. The task force is actually celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. We were founded here in New York as the National, I guess it was the National Gay Task Force Action Fund, actually our C4. We are a C3 and a C4 to be really, really nerdy. And we were founded for the same reason we still exist, to create equality for queer people all around the country so that you can, our tagline is be you, so that you can bring your whole self anywhere you want, whether it's your family, whether it's a job, whether it's ordering a meal at a restaurant, whether it's your faith community, whatever that is. And unfortunately, we are still working on that. I will tell you that 2023 is feeling a lot like 1973, the year we were founded. It really is. And I know anyone listening understands that.
Yeah, and we have some graphics about sort of the rise of anti-LGBTQ legislation, especially those targeting the trans community.
Yeah.
Why do you think we're seeing this surge in this legislation and also just backlash in sort of, certain media circles?
I think it's because they lost on marriage equality. They lost on marriage equality and they know they can't take it back. There was this little bit of a try earlier this year, maybe late last year. Oh, we're going to repeal this. Well, you can't. So they're going to pick on the people who everybody thinks they don't know. 30% of Americans say they don't know a trans person. I am sure that 30% of Americans would not now say they don't know a gay or lesbian person, right? But so the trans community, people like me, are easy targets. And, not so much people like me. Yeah, I'm trans, but I have the privilege of race and class and in some ways age. But trans kids and trans women of color are an easy target. And because they don't have many protections, especially kids, is a kid going to sue you? And so it makes it, there are 70 bills have been passed in states, and there are hundreds that are trying to be passed, attacking trans kids and increasingly trans adults, to say that people like me can't have gender appropriate health care.
Yeah.
So I think it's because it's an easy target. It's always, they're bullies.
Yeah.
these people, they're simply the same bully we all met in the playground. Now they're state legislators.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about what the task force sort of does to combat those? Because I know we were just talking that there used to be so many organizations, but then a lot of them folded after marriage equality.
Right.
So what has the task force sort of response been to these?
Well, I mean, we're in it to win it, right? We're not going to go away. You know, we do a tremendous amount of work in Florida, which right now is kind of controversial. We have an office there. We do field work there. We've been working in Polk and Hillsborough counties just as sort of a test case to build out our field operation. So we're on the ground. We do this enormous conference once a year called Creating Change, which I know you've been to.
Yes.
It's astonishing. It'll be in New Orleans in January. It was just in San Francisco to kind of kick off our 50th anniversary, right? We've never been in San Francisco before. It's like going home to mom. And so we work on the Hill. We certainly work in the States, particularly with our field operation, which is really one-to-one conversations with voters or potential voters.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's about the vote. Kids can't vote, so we need to on their behalf.
Yeah.
We and their moms and dads, their teachers, we need to advocate for folks who, because they're 12, don't have a lot of political power yet.
Yeah, and that's what I also like about your book is that, you know, your father, like you said, was closeted for most of his life, and maybe not most of it now. Hopefully it's tipped in the other direction. But, you know, you want sort of the generation coming up next to have it better and easier. So for people who are out there listening and they say, listen, you know, you could be gay, you could be trans, but don't bring that to the workplace. What is your message to them, Jessie?
I want people to feel comfortable bringing their entire selves to the workplace, because you're right. And I will tell you, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I grew up with a lot of queer people, but I knew none of them because Ellen hadn't come out on television yet, because nobody talked about it, right? After the fact, my mom said, "Oh, you know what? My guitar kid was gay, and our church organist was gay." Nobody told me that. And it wasn't until I got to university, until I went to actually Creating Change, that I looked up and around and thought, well, here are 70 different ways that I could be and be loved and be okay. And we're taking back all of that visibility right now. And that's what's scary about this moment. And that's why it's really important for our allies in our workplaces to make room and space to support us in being fully visible in our work offices.
Yeah. And I guess, Sam, the same question for you, because, you know, we are on the internet, spoiler alert, but sometimes it can be, you know, a difficult place to be, you know, queer.
Yeah.
So what would your message be for people who are watching, who are sort of getting ready to leave a trolly comment or something?
Well, don't.
Yes.
And, you know, like, get out more. Go. There are queer people all around you. It's, you know, there's certainly church organists. Boy, that is a classic. But it like, for one thing, no harm is being done by me being who I am. No harm is being done to you if your straight marriage or your imagined straight congregation is so fragile that my existence, the existence of all these amazing trans kids who are coming out, will threaten it, then you don't got much. You know, if the foundations of your straight life are that fragile, then that needs to be examined before you come after me or come after some 12-year-old. Like, for one thing, pick on someone your own size.
Definitely. And, you know, we have so many people joining us. We have, I want to say hello to them, Rabsam from Mozambique, Kathy from New York. I think we know who that is. Andrew from New York, not me, though I am saying hello. And then, you know, there's so many things that are happening right now. And I remember when I was first entering the workforce, I still felt a little cautious about coming out to some of my bosses and upper management. So for young professionals, and I think we've all been there, what is your message to them entering this climate where, okay, things aren't looking good for me right now? What is your suggestion to them? Jessie?
Well, I would start with compassion. First and foremost, self-compassion. We live in a moment when it might not be safe for you to be out at your workplace. And even if legally it's allowed for you to be out, you need to be the one to determine whether you come out. And it is not on you to come out. You don't owe it to anyone. So first and foremost, self-compassion. And beyond that, remember that when you come out in any way, you make room for other people around you. And I think that it is one of the bravest things you can do.
And Sam?
Well, the kids who are coming out, and by kids, I really do mean like grade schoolers, high schoolers who are coming out are, next year's workers. So I agree with you that it's your story and it's also your life and your safety. So, don't do something that would be unsafe and everybody needs a job because you need to pay rent. But every time somebody comes out, it makes a little bit more room for, the 13-year-old who has a lemonade stand this year, but is going to be captain of industry in 10 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's on us who have this freedom, right? I work at the National LGBTQ Task Force. Coming out at work is sort of not even a thing, right? But I worked for Security Pacific National Bank, and I was not out because I knew that my boss would fire me because he could have then, because I'm old. In more than 20 states in the country, you can be fired just for being gay, right? You don't have to have like screwed up at work. Just because somebody decides they don't like that you're gay, you're out. So, and that's something that we need to pass the Equality Act. And it's something that the task force has been working on and is looking forward to working on again whenever it's introduced next.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point when you first joined us about intersectionality, because one of the things that's so beautiful about the LGBTQ communities is that we cut across every other group. And we have a comment here from Philip who says that there are so many trans bills out there right now targeting trans people, but a lot of trans people are also autistic. And the, people, they're already discriminated against for other reasons. And how can colleagues show up for, LGBTQ workers, especially, trans colleagues or non-binary colleagues who really feel under attack right now?
Well, there are some simple things. If somebody tells you their pronouns, believe them and use them. And if you mess up, apologize and skip on. Like, don't make it a thing. That's horrible. Somebody tells you their name, believe them. Why would you not believe someone if they said, my name is Andrew? It's like, I'm pretty sure it's not. Like, you would never do that. And, there's a trope about it's not so much that you're invited, like, oh, you're welcome to come work here. It's that we created this so you're comfortable. Make sure that you either have gender neutral restrooms or you're really clear and there's signage that says, use the restroom you're comfortable with. And don't be policing people's peeing habits. So it's the workplace is in some ways a very simple thing. And also that you're advocating for your queer colleagues, that, they don't have to be the one to stand up for themselves every gosh darn time.
Yeah.
Right? That it's your job to advocate for them as queer people, as people of color, as neurodivergent people, as disabled people, whatever that is, because nobody comes as just one thing. I'm not just a white person. I'm a white trans person. I'm a white trans masculine person. I'm not Christian. Like, there's a million things that I get to bring to work, which is a huge privilege. Everybody should get that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where they work.
And something that I'm curious about too, and I always like to bring this into discussions about people who may be marginalized in the workplace, is how do you find your community? Because I think the go-to suggestion is always, oh, there are business resource groups or employee resource groups. But what I always tell people is there's also the off the books employees resource groups. And those are the ones that you want to find. So Jessie, how would you suggest people find their community in the workplace?
Well, I think that it's a process of making friends. And I know that sounds like really basic, but it is not. I'm not talking about internet friends here. I'm talking about IRL friends, right? And in order to make friends, you need to take I call it a micro risk with a person, right? And you need to be explicit with a person. And you don't need for them to be queer in order for them to be a part of your work community that makes you feel like your queer environment is a safe environment.
Yeah. And Sam, any suggestions?
It's so funny because I've been at the task force for a long time, so now it's hard for me to remember what it was like.
And also, you could probably find the LGBTQ people there.
Yeah, it's actually not that hard. We actually have a number of fabulous straight folks who work at the task force, but it is a little unusual. You know, I have never worked in a place where that was something I could do. Like when I worked on Wall Street, it was not something I could do. And, you know, and that, you know, then did I care? No, because I didn't know any different. Now I look at it, I'm like, ooh, I did an amazing job for the bank. I could have done an even better job if I didn't have to worry all the time that somehow or another my boss was going to figure out that my girlfriend and I had gone to Provincetown on vacation, right? And what did that mean? So, you know, yeah, we all have the ability to find our community, and it's just a little bit hard. You need to take that micro risk. I think micro risk is an amazing, like, I love that.
Yeah.
The micro risk of, like, you know, just chatting someone up in the lunchroom.
Yeah.
Which is also harder now that a lot of us don't have lunchrooms.
Yeah.
We don't.
And also actually, yeah, the micro risk is great because
Yeah.
I know someone a while ago who put in a message in saying, hey, you know, I'm new to the city and my partner and myself, we're trying to find our own community or whatever. And I knew of a little sort of like separate group chat that a few gays had. And I was like, hey, so I messaged them on the side and said, hey, here's a little safe place. So it doesn't have to be like a corporate sort of
An
safe
ERG.
place.
But, you know, this is also the point of why people who can need to take the risk of coming out at work, because I'd be a lot easier to find now than I was when I worked at the bank, right?
Yeah.
And so I could be helpful.
And my last question is, this is obviously Pride Month, and you know, Pride means different things to different people, and it's a complicated, I think, or not complicated, but complex sort of event. So as we enter into sort of the heart of Pride Month, what message would you like people to carry with them, Jessie?
I feel very clear about that. Lead with love, come out if you can. It's that straightforward. I think that when we start these conversations from a place of love, they get a lot further. And I think that you should come out regardless of what that means for you. Because here's the thing, coming out is not something that belongs to the queer community. You don't have to be gay to come out. But when you are open about who you are, whatever that means for you, you make space around you for other people to be open about who they are. So come out as a baseball lover, for God's sakes, but talk about your identity.
Mm-hmm. And that, and that opens the door for so many other people.
Yeah.
Sam?
You know, I think that for sure, but that right now this community deserves joy. And so Pride is also about joy, and it's about that moment where you can step off the curb and be everything you are, be however queer you are. I worked on Pride in New York for a million years, and it was the opportunity to create that space for people to just be unbelievably queer. So take that chance, because boy, we really deserve some joy right now.
Yeah, and you also get to see that intersectionality in New York City Pride, because it's everyone and everywhere in between. So it's fantastic.
Yeah,
and
it is.
Also, before we leave, I just want we have some love for the task force in the comments, and you know, Philip says my husband and I were on the host committee for Creating Change in 2011.
Wow.
The task force does an excellent job.
Well, thank you, Philip.
Yeah. Well, thank you to both of you.
Sure.
So thank you, Sam. Thank you, Jessie, and obviously hope they will find you on LinkedIn. And Jessie, obviously, for your book, what's the website again?
It's jessiejhempel.com.
There you go. And thank you all for joining us. And it was so wonderful to have you here for this conversation. Thank you for joining us and submitting your questions. You can continue the conversation here. And of course, check out our other stories on the news feed on the top right of your screen. For now, I'm Andrew Seaman. Thank you for watching LinkedIn News Live. Stay well and best of luck.